Hello, and welcome to another week of the Story Darks podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we are continuing our discussion of Crowded with Volume 2, Issues 7 through 12, by Chris Sebela and Rose Stein, which is...
and Ted Brandt.
Yes, Rose Stein and Ted Brandt, yes. I was trying to remember their Blue Sky handle and Instagram and everything else is just a mashup of their names. So I was trying to remember what that was.
Yeah, I think they go Brandt Stein. I think it's the
Brandt
combination
Stein.
there.
Yeah.
I think it is Ted who the profile claims is most of the one who's posting stuff. So maybe that's why I get first billing. But yeah, with the art team there. So yeah, this volume is subtitled Glitter Dystopia. I don't know if that means anything. Probably doesn't. Not a lot of meaning, I think, in the volume titles. I think they're just meant to be fun.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing is I enjoyed this volume, but I have nits to pick, and I had to keep reminding myself this is primarily a fun book. No, but I think I was looking for a little more intellectual critique of culture, things like that, just because it was so heavy on that in the first issue. But I think that was more world building, and the world itself is the cultural critique. They're not going to go on a soapbox every single issue about.
Yeah. That's interesting. No, I found this volume in my reread much more enjoyable. I think the major nitpick we had last week really involved the side stories. I think, right?
Yeah.
It was in specific, it was the other social media killer, Trotter, that character.
Yeah.
And kind of spending time with him and seeing his backstory, motivation, everything about that, spending time with him, taking time away from Vita and Charlie, I think was kind of our biggest hurdle. And there was also the Circe plot, which I found more tolerable in this volume, because this volume is so hyper focused on Charlie and Vita and their relationship, both as client and hiree, as in a relationship at the end there, as friends, as lovers, whatever it is. This one is hyper focused on them, and I think that's where the book shines. As we harped on last week, it's that buddy comedy formula. It's the Odd Couple formula. And here, I think in volume 1, it was just very much set up that Charlie was this total chaos agent that couldn't take anything seriously, couldn't follow directions, seemingly couldn't grasp the gravity of her own situation.
Couldn't fire a gun.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I think
so,
that was the metaphor for her character was whoops, I'm a really good shot.
But in here, I think in this volume, while they're still at odds at times, they're at least pulling in the same direction now. They find ways to work together and rely on each other. Even if it's still in Charlie's case, even it is still kind of a chaos randomness to it. They're still working towards the same goals, as opposed to volume 1 when they were very much at odds, when Vita had to literally pull Charlie, dragging and screaming people are trying to kill you. Unless you want to die, you have to come with me and do this stuff. And it seemed like Charlie as a character couldn't get that through her head. Here in this volume, that they're much more aligned, and I enjoyed that, and I enjoyed seeing the two of them again try to figure out what the balance is between the two of them. And I think it starts right away in volume 7 when they're on the Hyperloop. They're on the loop to Vegas there. And at one point, Vita is just go into that room there, the control room, and do the Charlie thing, which is basically push a bunch of buttons, wreck stuff, and just intentionally cause chaos because that's going to give us an out. And Charlie at first is offended by that, and then is well, might as well just do me, And so the idea that they find ways to work together, and they're at least kind of on the same page, maybe not the same page, they're at least they're in the same chapter this time, And I found that a much more enjoyable read. But you said you have some more nits.
Yeah, well, okay.
Is it mostly the commentary part? Because there is less of that. They they kind of shine the satire light on a lot of different things here, but there isn't that second level of commentary, which I would agree with you on that.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, that was my main thing, and but that one I was pretty easy to get over because it was like, okay, that's fine. And I'm like, issue 7, I think, like, really kicks down the door. Like, who doesn't love like a bottle episode on a train?
Yeah.
Like, like I think my like I love From Russia with Love, because there's a big train thing where, like, there's a good guy, there's a bad guy, they're on a train. It's confined, and there's only so many things you can do. It forces a certain level of contact. And I love North by Northwest, also big train scene. And then I never saw Bullet Train, oddly, but it seemed very up my alley.
Yeah, I mean, Bullet Train's a fun, dumb movie, but you're right. That is another kind of trope there. The idea of putting your characters in a confined space when they got to get through X number of bad guys, and
Yeah.
how do they get out of it?
So here's my thing, and like I'll say what I wrote down and then caveat it.
Okay.
I think a lot of this volume felt like a CW TV show. And I like CW TV shows. I watch Flash and Arrow, but the points where those get tedious are when, characters can't just have a conversation and they're like keeping secrets from each other for no good reason anymore. And, in issue 7, Charlie gives a backstory, and then she kind of says to herself like how she made that backstory up. And, I felt like I was reading the same conversation over and over and over, and it was like 3 inches in a cloud of dust type progress on that relationship. The romantic subplot, I felt like, they teased it, but it kind of came out of left field. I could take it or leave it. It is like a classic dynamic of this buddy cop thing, but I felt like the amount of coverage it got could have been cut in half without really losing anything. It's like, we get it. Charlie has actually fallen in love with Vita. Vita is very guarded, unsure. That's not really character development. That's not really anything new. Other than, Charlie didn't really mean to fall in love with her. But given the, I don't know, 40 pages of that I had to read to get that, I felt like I felt like they were really vamping on the romantic subplot for a long time. And maybe that was just to set up, the impact of pulling the rug out.
That's what I was going to say is how the book ends, how this volume ends, is their breakup, not as just a couple there, but in terms of protector or protectee.
Right.
Charlie cancels the contract and gets a new defender who, spoiler alert, it ends up being Cersei and then like another wig. But if you don't put the time in there and it's like a flash in the pan for a couple pages at the end, then I think it feels it comes out of nowhere. So are you saying maybe either spend less time or spend more time on it? Like, is that the way to go? Like,
Or
invest
have it
more time
progress like in some way. Like, I mean, I think the only thing that's changed between volume 1 and volume 2 in their relationship is, like, 1, they've consummated, but 2, Charlie's like officially into Vita now, and Vita is still kind of the same old Vita. Maybe this kind of like cracked the slab a little bit, but we don't get to see that beyond the pages, until we go beyond the pages of this volume. So it felt like a lot of time for that, until like the last page. I was like rolling my eyes every time we went to the Cersei stuff, because it was like,
And
this is so much about a character who has not yet played a role. 12 issues in, like 400 pages in.
And I go back to what I said last week about if all of her scenes were wordless and like there was no narration and the only text we saw was maybe we see like text on her phone or when she's looking at a screen or something like that, I think that would have been much better. When who's this mysterious person working for this other group, who seems to be after them, but at the same time, like saving them. I think with that character, I wanted more mystery. The thing I didn't like the thing I don't like about her story through these 12 issues is that we know something about her. Like I didn't need the backstory. I will give you that. Her little bit of like what her childhood was like and things, little bits of whatever their
Granted,
Instagram thing is,
I did think it was a very cool storytelling to like
yes.
go through different social media platforms with the comment section. Like that was all very cool. I just didn't care about the story.
100%. That storytelling device, very cool. Let's use that and do like story, like tell Charlie's story that way. Because clearly she lives online, Like, so I'm with you on the mechanics are very cool there, but I didn't need that from Circe. I think I would have liked that character more if she just was this like hidden person, silent assassin, whatever, who you didn't know whose side she was on. Is she after Charlie? Is she after Vita? Because I think the important thing at the very, very end there, the last bits after she picks up Charlie, she says, I need you to tell me everything about your former defender,
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like she's not there for Charlie. She's not there for the Reaper campaign. Her target this whole time apparently has been Vita. And so I think that would have been a cool reveal if we didn't get the fact that, oh, she has this group of superiors that she's defying and she goes after them and takes them out. Like I didn't need that part. I'm with you there. I didn't need that backstory. If she was just this silent third character who every time we go back to, it's just like 2 pages of silent scenes. You're kind of like, what's going on with this? Again, is she on their side, not on their side? I think that intrigue would have been cooler in terms of how to handle that character there.
Now let me play devil's advocate for myself.
Okay, sure.
I think what I'm complaining about here is 12 issues, many of which she gets several pages of coverage on, and no payoff until the final page of issue 12. I guess what I'm saying is I like sticking with the POV of our 2 main characters, and it would have been really cool if this handoff happened, and then you find out in issue 14 that Charlie finds out that this person has like been in Charlie's apartment before, been tracking them this whole time, has pictures of the 2 of them. And it's like, wait, are you hunting me for the Reaper Company? It's like, no, not you. And then you find out like, oh, she's been trailing behind them this whole time. But had they done that, I might have been like, oh, sure, they conveniently work this in. Whereas like here, they've been steadily plotting it for a very long time. Clearly, Chris and the creative team have known where this is going.
Yeah.
So I think I'm just difficult to please. I just felt like it was a lot of information without really telling me anything I cared about.
And I think, well, when it comes to Cersei's backstory there, I 100% agree. When it comes to, again, as I said, when it comes to her, like whoever hired her, like that's not important because we learn about them. We learn about the fact that she has gone off contract, whatever her contract is. And then she eliminates those people like instantly. So why do we need to know that about them? Like, why is it important that we know that she has gone rogue from whatever her initial assignment was? Why is that important?
Right. Now, again, it could matter in the future. I'm constraining myself to this volume.
But it 100% doesn't matter by the end of 12. When she picks up Charlie at the end, her motivation does not matter because the reveal, again, isn't that last thing about her focus being on Vita. And we see some of that too, right? In terms of she's been in both their apartments, obviously, but like she has taken things from specifically Vita's, like her footlocker of important stuff, right? Like the Secret Service badge, she's taking pictures from. So we've seen her collect things, but again, we're still uncertain. Is she just collecting intel on the target or targets, or is it something else? So that motivation is what's important. But yeah, the idea that she's gone rogue against her assignment, like that you're right. I'm with you there. That stuff is unimportant, but globally, I like that she seated her. As I'm saying this, maybe they could have done a thing where we don't get her point of view. She doesn't get a lot of pages, but at every major moment, every major encounter that Vita and Charlie have, like she's in the background, like in a crowd
that would have
shot,
been very cool,
and
then you could do a flashback page to show, and then
Well,
people were like, "Oh, you can't just shoehorn that in." You go flip through your old
yeah.
issues, and you're like, "Oh man, they actually had her in there."
Well, and that's the thing though, because again, when we talk about how these characters are specifically colorized to make them stand out. Again, Charlie, obviously with the pink hair, doesn't can't really change that. But even like when they go incognito, she's wearing all black and has like the pink scarf. You know, Vita is always wearing yellow. That's her color there. They've given Cersei green, whether it's the hair, the dress, whatever it is. So in the background, you could have had this character, this woman who has this like bright green hair. And some readers would have picked up on it like, wait, is that the same person who was outside the house fire, who's now, who's at the diner now. So at the library, all these things, you could have seeded it that way. And I think that could have been just as clever, I think.
Oh, I think that's technically clever, but I think that almost pushes this to a different type of book. Because I mean, this is still a comedy.
Yeah. Well, because then it becomes, well, who is this person? Why is this character in every moment? And so yeah, maybe as a reader, it pulls your focus from what the book is want you to focus on, which is Vita and Charlie and their relationship and how they get along together. Instead, you're looking through every issue now, being like, is the green haired woman there?
Right.
Yeah,
and I think that's a cool twist.
But I can see why, from a creative standpoint, why you wouldn't want to seed the mystery just for her to be the next defender, just for this reveal here. So I think it's a little catch-22 there. Again, I think there may be, I don't know if there are better ways to do that, but there are certainly other ways to do that. I think we can agree on that, right? There are different options there. Are any of them demonstratively better than any of the other ones? I'm uncertain about that.
So I didn't mean to start so negative. Let me also say, while I have mixed feelings about this volume, I think issue 9 is the best issue of the entire series.
Okay.
I mean, just everything about it is fantastic. And if you described, like, if I read a summary of this book, like if an issue by issue was on Wikipedia or something, I would be like, that's dumb. There's all this buildup for a heist, and the heist kind of like fails. They don't get what they want out of it. Don't care. It's so cool. First of all, the illustration for Vita's plan.
I was gonna point out that is my single favorite page.
Yeah,
the fact that it's 100%. In that style, like a how-to manual style kind of thing, is so fantastic.
I just was like, I don't care if the plan works or not. Yeah. Like the fact that they illustrated the plan this way,
and that's the best part. The plan fails at step 1. Like setting off the EMP doesn't work.
Yeah. But then you get Charlie's plan, which is an A+. It's like, like that finally turned me around on that character. I still think she's annoying, but that's when I was like, okay, this is a character worth following.
And this is what I was saying at the beginning, the idea of they're finding a way to work together, to accept kind of who each other, like the nature of each person, and both of them being able to roll with it. Because in volume 1, Vita was so obstinate and Charlie was so carefree, and neither one of them was like, well, hey, why don't you loosen up some? Hey, why don't you take this more seriously? Neither one of them could get on this, could get together on that. So here, when Vita's grand master plan doesn't work and Charlie does the most insane thing, but as soon as it happens, even Vita's like, okay, you know what? That was good. Like, we can do this. This can work. Like as soon as her picture is up on that giant wall there, Vita immediately is like, "What did you do?"
Oh yeah,
she's furious.
My actual thought was when she put that up there, I thought they were gonna like hit the bricks and leave town while sending everyone. I thought they were abandoning the heist and instead of like using the crowd as camouflage. And Vita did not seem to have a hard time chanting along with the mob, which was also great.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. So in the moment there, she sees very quickly, okay, again, this is coming off of them having to find a way to work together on the Hyperloop, and them having the kind of the drunken night in the previous issue, going, in the casino. So again, finding some common ground. But you're right, the idea that Charlie can use her innate chaotic nature and channel that towards what their actual goal is, which is how do we infiltrate this building? How do we get into this? What was it? What do you call it? The character Quincy, right? It's Tabula Rasa, of course. How do we get into here? How do we find a way in? And instead of sneaking in, they just go in with the crowd. And of course, what's happening at Tabula Rasa this weekend, whatever, it's ReaperCon. And so you
with
get
Artist
a fun
Alley and everything.
Yeah. You get a fun critique and a satire of con culture. And again, goes back to what I was saying of there's still plenty of satire in this volume. There's less commentary about like what con culture is. I know we always bring up someone like Mark Russell and even someone like Sarah Gailey, where if they were to satirize something like this, there would be at least a little bit there of commentary on this. It wouldn't just be presented that way. And we see that later, I think, when we get to the people who are locked in the silo. We see more of that of we're satirizing society, we're satirizing this community, these people, these ideas. We're not really spending time to like drill down and really have something to say about it, which is fine. I mean, they're pivoting it away from that. I think I'm with you in that a lot of that commentary early on in volume 1 was simply establishing what the world was like. So maybe they're a little less concerned about that in this volume here. But
there's really not that much more to say about con culture. Like, just depict it, and it's like,
and I love a little bit too, right? The mob runs in, and we see this kind of faraway view, like on a balcony. There's two people who are dressed like Charlie and Vita from volume 1. So here we are at ReaperCon, and there's cosplayers as Charlie and Vita.
Right.
The way that they're depicted early on from, I guess, the initial news reports, which is the kind of thing that would happen. If you take the idea of con
dangerous
culture
to be Charlie, but given how stupid people are.
Well, but that's the kind of thing where it's so obvious you're not the person,
right?
Until like mob mentality takes over.
Exactly.
Like in the dozens of cons I've gone to, dozens and dozens of cons, like at no point do you think the person you're talking to is actually the person you're talking to, which is shown by the number of celebrities and actors and whatnot who will go cosplay as either the character themselves or they play, or someone. Like when you're in con, like no one assumes that, everyone just assumes that you're just another fan. But if you're told like, hey, this person is here dressed as this, and everyone goes looking for it, now everyone's paying attention. So if you now know that Charlie is here at Tabula Rasa at ReaperCon, like, now you're on a hair trigger. Everyone who's wearing pink or has pink hair is now a potential a target. So yeah, that kind of thing. I think that's a fun kind of silly, ridiculous detail. But again, it works out probably in a lot of ways better than whatever Vita's master plan was.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah. If the MP goes off, I think her plan's solid. But she also just has that like superhero thing of like she'll win any matchup regardless of how many people are it's Cap in the elevator, right? Like every time she has a big, there's 9 people around her, and for the most part, we don't get 8 pages of action. We get, kick, punch, and everybody's on the ground. And that's all I need, especially out of a comedy book. If this was like an espionage book and she was like the master tactician, I want to see her, analyzing like, all right, well, if I hit that guy in the neck, he's going to bend over and that'll give me a shot at the other guy's throat. And, all of that breakdown, but that's when the book is about that. And that's
what Velvet was about. The book we did, Edward Baker and Steve Epting, like that's a spy book. Our character it's all about the craft. Here, it's a comedy book. And yes, she's Secret Service. And yes, she's a tactician. And again, she lays out that entire plan. And it's, and that's a very spy infiltration plan. And step 1, it all goes to hell. You don't get past step 1. So we never see how it works out. And yet Charlie gets them in the door and past security, because security is worried about the thousands of people that just ran in to what is supposedly this like highly secure. What is Tabula Rasa? It's a resort, hotel, living area, community. It's not a casino. It's like a community. It's like a living area, right? Something like that.
Yes, it is a like condo
Yeah,
place with like sanitized Wi-Fi
yeah.
that
It's meant to be,
will,
yeah, totally,
yeah,
like it's highly
totally private.
secure. Yeah, 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 yeah. So again, the idea of bringing a mass of people here, which ties up security, and then it frees Vita and Charlie to get all the way up to, to Charlie's quote unquote friend Quincy at the top there. So yeah, in the end, throwing a little chaos into Vita's highly structured tactical brain, you know, ends up working out good.
Yeah, exactly. So okay, well, I'm just glad you agree with everything on issue 9 because I do
Yeah,
think there is the type of reader who'd be like, "What was the point of that heist?" I'm like, I
yeah,
don't care what it was. Like
yeah.
the but
Well,
but
but they
but we
do get
learn more
info.
about the characters.
We do get more, yeah. But plot wise, they don't get the exact answers they're looking for, but they do get the data. We see, later on, we in the whatever the VR headset thing that Vita uses to replay that Secret Service incident. That's also, I guess, like their computers. Like she has a drive with the data in it, and that's scrolling through, and we get confirmation that there are a lot of bots here, that the government is after Charlie, and we get more Charlie backstory, which she's like, yeah, I did some temp jobs, whatever, for various government entities, but she didn't feel she was being valued, so she stole what she thought was like low level, unimportant data and sold that to supplement her income. So we do get some story points there. We do get so it's not completely for naught. They don't get the exact answers. But yeah, all that's just like window dressing stuff. Because you're right, it is more about seeing the two of them work together and getting a little more about their characters. And I think there's a softening, and we can talk about maybe how effective this is. There's a softening of both characters. They're a little more sympathetic as we see what their backstories actually are. We see how Charlie, despite being someone who is like wildly narcissistic and egotistical, you know, is not intentionally trying to be a bad person. But when she feels she's not being valued, then her like first instinct is to steal stuff and sell it to make money. you
Yeah.
know and then we see we do get little backstory on Vita and her time with the Secret Service, and whatever and her history with Reaper, right? She was assigned to cabinet members, and then there was an like maybe the first or early Reaper campaign to take out some of these secretaries, including her charge, Secretary of Defense. They were all murdered through an early Reaper campaign, and she feels like she was at fault because she didn't see it coming. That's why she has the VR headset to replay that incident over and over again, kind of torturing herself. So I, it, I don't know how effective it is, but they are making an attempt. The team is
Yeah.
making an attempt to soften some edges and make them a little more sympathetic. I still think both of them are still pretty rough. And I'm okay with that. Like, it doesn't turn me off of the characters. But like, I can recognize the effort to try to, hey, maybe Charlie's a little too unlikable. Maybe Vita's a little too standoffish. Let's try and soften him up a little bit. Again, I don't know how you feel about that, if it really works. I
I
think I think
I
you're
felt
closer to
like
me where
that was one of the more CW moments. It was like,
yeah,
of course, this is her backstory.
yeah, yeah,
This is
yeah.
like this is the classic.
It's tragedy. Yeah, of course.
It's well, and it's the '90s cop who like
Yeah,
oh, this thing happened. It's what's his name from Die Hard. It's
yeah,
it's like a billion people who had like one bad incident on the job and
yeah.
just
And it
can't
haunts them
stop the
forever. Yeah,
self-loathing
yeah.
stuff.
But it
And they got
also
to
it
keep it
also
a
drives
secret.
them. It's also their motivation. It's also why Vita is
Right.
so good at being a bodyguard, is because the one time she feels like she screwed up, when for all we know, there was nothing she could have done. The way she talks about it is like that was the first time she ever heard of the app Reaper. So the idea of crowdfunded assassinations wasn't in the ether yet. And the first time it comes out of it, when what you say, like a dozen non-connected random shooters show up because there's this campaign for assassinations for money. Like, if you don't think that something exists, like, how can you expect for that? So, but yet she's still
Right. I
eats
mean,
her
that's
up.
the silliness of it. It's like,
Yes, it
obviously it's
is.
an emotional thing.
Yeah.
I think the thing for me is in some interview on the West Wing Weekly, they had Brad Whitford on and they were asking about, should Josh and Donna have ever got together? And his quote was, "There's nothing more boring than consummated love. Like, really good drama comes from the tension."
Well,
And
yeah.
I think the tension they were juggling in this
Yeah.
book was the romantic tension, which they didn't keep hinting at it. They just ripped the band-aid off and then just bathed in it.
Oh,
And the other tension was Vita's backstory and Charlie's backstory.
mhm.
And I feel like they're removing the interesting tension. However, they are introducing new tensions.
Yeah.
And like the Vita backstory, Charlie backstory were not interesting enough to me to last for, you know, 15, 20, 30 issues.
Which is maybe why they dropped him here.
Yeah,
You
I
know.
think so.
Well, yeah. I
That
mean,
being said, we still only sort of know Charlie's, and you don't have all the reason in the world to believe everything she's said so far.
so
Like, I'm
here's the
still
thing. So
not sure we know why the government wants her dead.
see, here's the thing. You alluded to the scene on the Hyperloop train when she's giving her backstory, and then Vita falls asleep, and Charlie gets mad, and she's like, "Well, I made it up anyway." Um, I don't think I believe her on that. I
Uh,
think that's a defense mechanism. I read that as that was a rare moment of self-awareness and truthfulness. And then when she sees Vita has fallen asleep, she switches back into kind of her defense mechanism mode. I read that as genuine. I believe when she confronts Quincy and talks about, what it was up in that startup in San Francisco. Like, I believe her when she says, "Listen, you guys couldn't take care of yourself." You know, I I believe that. I believe her when she says she was doing these random temp jobs for the government and didn't feel valued. So she's, I believe I lean towards her telling the truth there in terms of, now, is that the actual reason why the government wants her dead? I don't know, but I believe there's truthfulness in those stories there, that she, whether through her character being altered or changed in some way, or she has a moment of clarity, I believe she's telling the truth there. Now, whether her understanding of that and her delusion in terms of justifying her actions is correct, I think we're meant to question that. But I think the facts of what she's saying are true. That's how I read it.
I agree with that. I mean,
Okay.
I think I do think she's letting her guard down occasionally to test the water,
Yeah.
and it's not going great each time she does.
Oh, I don't think she tests the water. I think she's doing it without knowing it a little
Yeah,
bit.
I mean, I think yes, but I think she is one of those people who even the truth in their mind gets turned over so many times, and there's so much rationalization and self-defense that it's only still a partial truth.
A
Like, I
hundred
think,
percent, which is why I say I don't think she's entirely aware she's doing it. That she is trying to open up in the way that she thinks opening up means, and through that is letting some real truth there slip out. Even though maybe it's jumbled in her mind in terms of, you're right, kind of that what the perspective is, what her delusion is around it. But I do believe she's letting some actual bits of her personality, of her true self out. Because that facade, that veneer is starting to crack. As the longer these two are paired up, the longer this campaign goes on, the longer they're on the run, all of that. That fully self-absorbed narcissistic personality that she's lived for so long, that guard starting to slip here and there.
yeah, yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, I mean, she's not like a spy, right? It's
Yeah,
like she's, she's kind of a hack gig economy worker.
yeah,
So, as guarded as she is, she still doesn't really have the ability to just compartmentalize and vault herself off, even the way
exactly,
that Vita does.
exactly.
Vita's
Yeah,
had
yeah.
some professional training.
100%. Yeah, she's much better at that. So when Vita gives an answer, I think you feel like she is choosing to tell whatever it is, she picks her words much more carefully than Charlie does. Charlie is stream of consciousness, whether it's truth, whether it's lies, whatever it is. It's I don't think she's super aware or has a whole lot of control over what she's saying. Vita, though, I think we especially see that. I guess starting in issue, I guess it's 11 there, right? Because 10 is they're on the road after they've left Vegas there, and 10 is when they get to the silo. That's the the survivalist group or the ex-survivalist group, whatever you want to call it, run by the girl Ophelia there. When the two of them, obviously, when they're locked in the room there, I think Vita is still picking her words carefully. So whether they're heartfelt, whether they're about her past, whatever it is, her feelings towards Charlie, towards their relationship, she's being very meaningful and purposeful about it. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I know based on, one, how the book is presented, but two, what you said about Charlie's insights here. But what do you think of this Quincy guy?
I mean, I think he's just like he's a tech bro, you know.
Yep. Yeah.
He's a tech bro. He is, and he's also this is a situation where I don't think he's wrong about how he views Charlie, just as I don't think Charlie's wrong about how she views him and her friends. What did he say? She came and moved into her house and stayed for however long and never left, ate our food, blah, 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 did all these things here. And yes, she did steal their app and sell it down the street because she was angry, and because that's what Charlie does. But from Charlie's perspective, she was like, yeah, I did the laundry. I made your food. Like, you guys couldn't even eat and feed and clean yourself, Like, where would you would have never been able to do anything because all you guys were doing was coding. And so I think from both their perspectives, they're unable to see the other side,
Right.
But outside of that, I think Quincy is just meant to represent, like, yeah, every idiotic tech bro that started an app and made $1 billion.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much it. And I think that was your social commentary of the week.
Yeah.
For this volume, which is, well, that and like the fact that he's like, you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Pretty on the nose there.
Yeah.
And then her being like, your dad paid your rent when 28 or whatever.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So but you go straight from issue 9 to issue 10. Issue 10 begins with that long car drive with Circe, where, what I wrote down as I was reading it was like, these seem like we're just creating fake stakes for Circe, where they're like, oh, if you don't get it done in the next however long, we're going to put other people on it. I'm like,
and then she kills all those people.
Right. Well, I'm like, and I don't even technically know what she's supposed to do. I don't care if she gets it done or not.
Mm-hmm.
So why do I care if she gets it done in the next 10 minutes, 10 hours, whatever. And then she goes and kills all those people in a montage, which had she been killing off that organization in secret. And then, okay, so did I miss it? She was clearly applying to Defender later in that episode when it was asking the 6 questions.
Yes.
Did they say in that issue that she was applying to Defender? I didn't think they did. Okay.
No.
You only find out at the end that was the Defender application.
Yeah. I think you're supposed to make that connection after the fact. Yeah. Now that whole thing did lead to a very funny moment when Vita and Charlie are, in whatever their vehicle is, like the vehicle is from Quincy, and they see the giant mushroom cloud that Circe had set off by killing one of them, and Charlie's like, that was for us. And response to someone like, God, I hope not. Otherwise, that's some terrible aim right there. Yeah. So it's a funny moment from there. But you're right. Again, we don't need to know. I don't need to need Circe's motivation. I don't mind the character, especially where she ends up. But yeah, that whole sojourn of like the threat of something because she didn't do something else, which is then nullified because she just kills everybody. So we don't know what the threat was going to be. We don't know what she was supposed to do the first time, and we still don't know what she's doing actively now. So we're in the same place with her, except we got more cryptic information that is then now pointless.
Yeah. So that was, it felt like the good stuff was really good, but it felt like a lot of stuff that is maybe necessary but was drawn out. And felt like filler because it was drawn out.
Well, and again, by the end of 12, and you finish 12, and you see and we see the first truly significant Cersei moment, like the only one so far,
Right.
is her becoming Charlie's new bodyguard. Based on that ending, only a handful of things prior that we've seen Cersei do seem important. Her doing a recon of both Charlie and Vita's places, and kind of tailing them in the first book. That stuff seems important. Her clearing the hallway outside in, I guess it was volume 8, issue 8, I guess. There were a couple of group assassins coming in to get Charlie and Vita before they go and do their heist. She kills those assassins in the hallway there. That one seems important. The whole, is that in Phoenix? I think when she goes to Phoenix and kills those people.
Yeah,
Phoenix
en route to...
that is not important to her ending up as Charlie's new defender, 100%. As her new bodyguard. And so if you scrub all the stuff that doesn't strictly pertain just to build to that moment there, I think you can streamline some a little bit there, and then maybe you could spend a little more time in some of those pages dealing with or showcasing some more the relationship between Vita and Charlie. Especially right then, because that's they're on the road there in issue 9. They've left Vegas. You're right. They've consummated their relationship. They're together now. They're going to eventually, as we find out, they're going to this former ICBM silo in the middle of nowhere that these people that Vita knows. So we could spend more time with the two of them, which maybe would help bolster the split that comes later in issue 12.
Yeah. So the other thing that I thought was clever in this volume, which I kind of didn't realize was happening until it finished, is it kind of levels the playing field that each of them get to pick another hideout location, and they're equally terrible decisions.
Yes. Yeah.
In fact, Vita's is arguably worse. They get locked in a room, in a missile silo for a multi-level marketing cult.
I gotta say, I love the fact, again, so when we talk about
I love the fact that you thought it was a gun cult, and it's even worse.
This is satirization here. Not a lot of commentary, but yeah, the idea that, these are the crazy survivalists, right? Stockpiling guns, blah, 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 doing that. And it's like, nope, they're an MLM pyramid scheme, actually, and the whole goal is Ophelia's whole goal here is to hold on to them for X amount of time until the campaign is over and use their publicity later so they can sell more product.
Yeah, exactly. It's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was, the thing that I wrote at the beginning of issue 11 was 2 weeks left, but only 2 issues left. I felt like, are they going to try to just drag out the first 2 weeks for 10 issues and then just hurry us through the last 2 weeks in 2 issues?
So we should mention that. We didn't mention that up top here, that, going back to what we talked about at the in the zero here, this volume ends with issue 12, which was the last single issue that came out. And it was 2 years before, in between when issue 12 comes out and the eventual volume 3, which came out in a complete graphic novel story, not single issues. So this story ends with that cliffhanger, as it were, of Charlie getting into Cersei's car after having hired her, after having fired Vita and hiring a new bodyguard. That's where the story ends, essentially. They didn't get any more after that, and seemingly you didn't know if they were going to get back to it. So right. That for a long time was the end of the story until volume 3 comes out, when at the time there was no indication that was going to happen. Again, issue 12 comes out, I believe it was publication date was March 2020. So a lot of things were up in the air in terms of, especially with comics, in terms of what was going to continue coming out, what was going to ship, what was getting printed. There was a lot of uncertainty there. So that's not entirely on the creative team and on Image there. There was a lot of stuff going on. But the idea that this story would have for a long time ended right there, and you don't know what's happening next. There's when it ends, there's still a few days left there, right? A week or so left on the campaign.
Yeah.
So yeah, so Charlie's story isn't over yet, and yet the book is done. So yeah, I think there are there are questions about the timeline there in terms of how much story is left. Because obviously, when you're reading this, you don't think 12 is going to be the last issue. As you're reading this thing, you don't
Right.
think you're going to get to the end. If you're reading it in real time as they're being published, you don't think that's where it's going to end, and especially not after that final panel, that final page. You're not thinking this is the conclusion of the story. You're okay. What happens next in issue 13? And then it doesn't come, and then you're not sure it ever comes. And then by the time it does come in a complete volume of in trade paper 3, have you forgotten the story? Are you still wondering? Is a story you still want to come back to? So yeah, it's not an ideal situation publication wise, but at least they did get to come back to it and finish the story, which is something that, gosh, so many creators never get to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Okay, I got to ask one more question.
Sure.
So I wrote this in my notes. I was like, I don't want to get internet hate, but like, and I know that you're not like a big, pet person. You don't have any pets.
No.
Well, why the dog? Like, does the dog need to be in this book, or is that just another for fun and you have occasional jokes?
I I think it's just for comedy,
They
And
end
honestly,
up making the dog matter
I say it
at the end of
becomes a
each
plot
volume.
point, becomes a plot point. I don't think that was ever meant to be the point.
That's
I think it's
exactly my read. Yeah.
I think it's just meant to be funny because the dog is funny. It's drawn very cartoonishly. The
Well,
dog
that
has
and at the
funny.
beginning of issue 12, I thought we were going to get a whole issue from the dog's POV.
That would have been
It
fantastic.
kind of started that way.
That'd have been fantastic. Do a little pizza dog action there.
Yeah, I mean, it started
You know,
like at ground level with the dog's face, and you just see their argument over the dog's shoulders. And I thought, oh, are they gonna go like super artsy with this? But forgetting the dog ends up being the breaking point,
yeah,
which
but
is
it
perfect
also
symmetry to like stealing the dog was almost a breaking point
yeah.
in the first volume.
Having the dog and no, yeah, but of course that Vita having to go back for the dog or deciding to go back for the dog ends up from a plot standpoint meaning nothing because she gets back to the silo and Ophelia's like, here, take the dog, don't blow us up, like we're sorry, it's all good, so like that's completely diffused, so it's almost like the two of them break up for nothing.
Right.
Like the two of them could have gone back together to the silo and had it not been a problem. Of course, they don't know that at the time, but so in the end, it's like, well, she goes back there and gets everything she needs, including the rest of the stuff she left behind. Like she did some triage on her belongings. She gets all that back plus the dog, and for what? Now she's lost Charlie. So that there's an emptiness to that gesture there. So they found a way to make it work, but I think initially it's meant to be a comedy point. I don't think it was ever meant to be anything more than that.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear you say that because that was also my take.
Yeah.
That being said, for kind of like a throwaway thing for laughs, I think they end up making the dog matter more than it should.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, definitely. They they found ways to use dog, which I think is very funny. So I don't think it was pointless. I think it helps with some of the comedy. So yeah, no, I had no problem with it. Even in issue 12 there, when all of a sudden dog's existence becomes like critical to the story, both character wise and plot wise.
Yeah. Honestly, that's really all the anime. I mean, I enjoyed the little. Oh, my favorite Easter egg in the whole thing was, again in issue 9, Vita getting the elevator saying, "Now I have a key card." Ho ho ho.
Oh yeah,
For the
yeah.
Die Hard shout out.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Nice little.
you
nice
also
little
have all the
reference,
little things of like Todd's list instead of Craig's list,
yeah,
and
yeah.
the
Well, so we do
YouTube
get
thing and-
so we got all those apps, the gig apps in issue 1 there. In issue 7, after Vita falls asleep, and of course Charlie has like she pulls out like her 5th hidden phone or whatever it is, and she locks herself in the bathroom, and I guess she just like doom scrolls, and we see all the other apps there, all the various, whether it's Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, all of that. We see versions of all of those all those sites, all those apps, not the gig apps, but the social media apps, right? You
Right.
know, Set It, Chainmail, Bumble, like so, just like not even trying to hide what they are, but the idea that yes, that she's still phone obsessed, you know, social media obsessed, all of that stuff there, and all that stuff's really fun. Um, Again, just uh, your satire of the world of what our phones and what our technology has done to our brains, um, and kind of how addled we all are with it.
Yes. All right. Do you have any more notes? I feel
I have no more story
like
notes. I do one thing I want to point out that I really enjoyed from a from an art standpoint in this volume is that there was, I think, a lot more opportunity for them for them being Rose Stein and Ted Brandt to really have fun on the page, to really change up
yeah.
paneling, do create like we already mentioned Vita's plan, just one page that looks nothing like anything else. One of my favorite sequences is when they're on the hyperloop after Vita has directed Charlie to mess with the controls, and I guess they start tumbling and they go off the rails. The panels become, there's a double splash page where you read around in a circle and you get the sense that they're tumbling here. The panels are all asymmetrical and kind of broken up like shards of glass or whatever. We You get some different storytelling techniques there. When you're in the silo, and we already mentioned Cersei's backstory, the things on like the Instagram posts, things like that. Whether or not we liked seeing that story presentation was very cool. Seeing them do things different like that. I was going in the silo when Ophelia is kind of making her case. We see her pleading with Charlie and Vita, kind of laying out what her plan is about using their celebrity to sell more of their product, which happened to be guns. But like we get like the TV screens around her, like all the coverage of like basically how popular they are and all that. And so just I like seeing when artists get to play on the page and they get to do fun things with the story, with the action. And I think action here is the key word for this book because it is that action comedy story, you know? So anytime they have fights, large scale scenes, things like that, they can do fun stuff and not just be like you know, kind of close up panels of people getting punched and kicked or whatnot. They have the freedom to kind of mix it up. And I love seeing stuff like that. When it fits the story, when it fits the vibe of not just the book you're in, but what's happening in that specific scene. If chaos is happening in the environment, then when the paneling reflects that, then you as the reader are drawn into it. When it's on the page there, you're with the characters, and the uneasiness of how it looks to you on the eyes is, representative of how the characters feel as they're working their way through, which all, I mean, in this case, ultimately, it's always some sort of fight because that's what's happening here. There's some sort of confrontation, but the mood and the environment, all of that plays into the reader's experience when it's not just here's 5 panels on a page that are squares and rectangles.
Yeah.
When they mix it up like that, you get a richer and deeper reading experience.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think there are a couple other things they do. There is one shouting match in the bunker where Charlie's pushing, and you see they're drawing the background in every single panel, and then finally Vita bursts out in yelling, and the background art disappears just for that panel, and it's like yellow with kind of your comic-y pixelated black dots in the background, just to like, it's not like they were too lazy to draw the background again. It was to show the emotional outburst,
Yeah.
and how everything kind of falls out of focus with the rage. And like honestly, hats off to Charlie for being willing to stick her head in a lion's mouth because
Yeah.
like I think an angry Vita is genuinely scary, even if you think you're
Yeah,
friends.
yeah,
Yeah.
yo, no, she, if there's anything you take, she's not someone you cross. You know, she has
Yes.
no
Right.
compunctions about putting you down, kind of not so much getting her way, but maybe just shutting you up. No, yeah, without question, I think I think there's some really cool stuff there. And I think a lot of it, we should mention her name again, Triona Farrow, the colorist. I mentioned that fight on the Hyperloop. All those panels are action panels, not a lot of dialogue, not a lot of narration boxes there, but the way that those panels are all shaded, it's like there's a filter on this on the lens, whether it's a pinkish, a yellowish, a bluish kind of hue. They use that trick here and there, again, help draw you in, kind of fixate your eyes, help direct you around the page as you follow the colors around, so you don't get confused on that. And I think, going back to what you said about kind of that shouting match and how the background disappears, all of that's meant to draw your eye, right? You're right. It's not about being lazy and to not draw a background. The whole point is, in that moment, you need to be focused on what the character is saying and what their expressions, what they're feeling. And so, yeah, when you wash out the background and make it like a solid color, or some sort of pattern back there, your focus is solely on the character now, because you know where they are. The setting, they've established the setting.
It's a crappy old bunker.
Yeah, it's a close up on the face there, because that's where it's all your attention is supposed to be, right there on the character's face, on what they're feeling, on what they're saying. And say you can do that. All these choices are about directing the reader's eye down the page, what to look at, what's important, what order it goes in. All of that is part of sequential art storytelling. And so, yeah, when you have a sequence that builds like that and ends on a panel, that's meant to be emphasized and accentuated like that, it works. And that's how the medium is supposed to go. That's how sequential art shows movement. It's how it expresses itself, the way that you do with a camera, with motion picture. You can't do that here. The camera's not moving. So those focuses with not just the line art and how things are inked and what's highlighted, but it's also with the colors too. Where your eye is drawn on the page or drawn within a specific panel, all that stuff's considered, all that stuff matters. And I think with this book, with how, again, I don't want to say neon, because like Charlie's hair is pink, but it's not like always a bright pink, Vita's always in a yellow, but it's not a bright yellow. The jacket's kind of bright. When they're in the bunker, it's a little duller, but the character connotations are there. They're very primary, I guess. They stand out. They're noticeable. They're not loud though, but they draw your eye in the way that they're supposed to. You're always looking. You always know where you're supposed to look, because the art has told you, the art team, the full art team has told your eyes, told your brain where to look.
Yeah. Well, by the way, is it just my brain being broken, or did the last outfit Charlie was wearing for like the last two issues give strong Squirrel Girl vibes? I think it could just be the art in general.
A little bit.
Reading a Squirrel Girl.
A little bit. Well, I think also there's a bit of the hair there, kind of up in the buns and things like that. Charlie has Squirrel Girl energy. She has Doreen Green energy. There's no question about it.
In the best possible way. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Love Squirrel Girl. Yeah.
Squirrel Girl is like one of the most powerful heroes in the Marvel universe. She took down Thanos by herself. But I think the hair is doing a lot there. I think the hair is doing a lot for Squirrel Girl.
Yeah, I was like, hair, body style.
Yeah.
I was starting to see it a little bit, but
definitely.
But it's also like that fun, playful comic, cartoony animation that I just don't read that much.
Mm-hmm.
Most of what we read is so heavy-handed at times. That it's kind of a refreshing read.
And it is. And I think fun is the attitude you come to this book with, and you should come to this book. It's not too heavy. Again, whatever commentary or satire is, it's on the surface. I think it's meant to be on the surface. They're meant the things they're poking fun at. They're not trying to get super deep with it, and not every book has to, and that's fine. This book is a two-hander. It is the action comedy from the 80s and the early 90s that I definitely grew up with. Maybe you're a little younger than I am, but it's from that. It's that same genre of storytelling that is tried and true. Again, we talked about cable movies, right? Movie that did okay in theaters, but 2 years later, it shows up on USA or TNT, and it runs for like 9 years every Thursday night at 7. This is that kind of story you can go back to and just get lost in because it's fun. You're not in it for the plot. You're in it because there's some good action scenes and because the characters, while maybe not likable, are entertaining because of the oil and water of it all. You want to see them fight. You want to see them make up. You want to see them work together, be forced to work together. You want to see them work against each other. You just want to see those two opposing forces go at it. And that's where the draw is for this book. And that's where the comedy comes from. That's where the tension comes from.
Yeah. Totally agree. This is the end of my notes. I'm very excited to get into volume 3.
I am. Yeah. Which I will say still, as I mentioned, not 100% certain if I've ever read it.
I think you'll know within a few.
I'm sure I will. I'm sure I will. But
because either you read all of it or none of it.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, but it's possible I didn't know it even existed until we sat down and decided to do this book here. So I said, as of yet, I have not reread it, and or read it for the first time. We'll find out when we come back in next week to discuss volume 3.
All right. Well, until then, like, subscribe, share with a friend, and follow us on Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter in that order. Yeah.
Storyadarts.com. All the links are there.
And in the episode description, there's a link tree. So we appreciate any sharing around passing you can do. This book came to me by recommendation, so by all means recommend it to someone else who may not have thought to pick it up on their own, and hopefully they'll be as pleasantly surprised. Anyway, thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.